Hi everyone, this is John Sneisner, and today we got a special guest. It's been a while, Tim, but this is the Economic Truth Report number 30, and we got, of course, the great Tim Picciott with us. Me and Tim, we actually did a lot of reports together, and I think we started during COVID. We had some interesting times. We actually reported during the chaos of, in March of 2020 there, and we reported for I think a whole year or something. We did a bunch of reports, and we predicted a lot of stuff that's been kind of happening and been going on. And
I think it was before COVID. I think it was around the time of the repo crisis in like September
oh
2019.
yeah, that's right. We
Having
we kind of started there. Yeah, of course. That's what we did. Yeah,
which was pretty much went into all the COVID
yeah,
scamdemic, which I
because
think was a cover for what was really happening in September.
yeah, well, look at like you got the Iraq War in 2010 or whatever, to cover for the 2008 crisis. You got the 9/11, for
Well,
the
Iraq was going
dot-com
on.
bubble.
Iraq was going on, and after 9/11. So, and then the second time in Iraq. So
Yeah,
after we were funding Saddam
yeah,
Hussein as
exactly.
well.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. So it's about time to have another thing because, like, as we speak, Tim, there's a lot of craziness going on. Well, first of all, let me just quickly introduce Tim. We didn't even get to that, but Tim is, of course, a financial advisor and a certified financial planner. He's a great friend of mine. We've been known each other now for about I think was it 2019 we met or something. I feel like so it's been no 2018. I believe we met the first time, and
Acapulco
yeah,
2018,
there we
and
go. Yeah,
definitely thoughts with people in. And if you have the financial resources to do so, if you want to give
yeah.
$10, I know Berwick has a fundraiser that's going to the people of Acapulco who just got devastated by a terrible hurricane. So that's where you and I met. I know my girlfriend and I met down there. I
Yeah.
met a lot of great people down there, and yeah, right now they're going
Beautiful
through some
place.
stuff. Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty sad because of course suddenly the AI modeling didn't work very well. I listened to the radio here locally and there was a guy on. So I was like, oh yeah, our AI model didn't work because there's not too many hurricanes. Climate change, of course,
Sure.
was the blame for it, of course. But yeah, it's pretty sad. Any natural disaster, there's been and they're always happening, but they're just terrible when they happen because a lot of people get caught off guard, they're not prepared, and it's good to help people if they're in need of help down there. So yeah, go and check that out. That's pretty important, and help the people in Acapulco. It's a beautiful place, and we've had great advantage of being there a few times during our lifetime. So let's help the
Right
great
before the
people.
scamdemic was the last time, yeah, February 2020. We're hanging out
Yeah,
with Charlie Robinson. We were actually interviewing Jeff, and
yeah,
I remember we were talking about all the different things related to the scamdemic before the scamdemic even began, and saying things in that interview with Jeff about
yeah,
how, if you envision yourself getting very sick and this is really bad, and then you're going to manifest it onto yourself and make things
100%.
worse. And so, there's a mindset aspect to it. There's,
Yeah.
a health aspect to it, that they don't do anything to actually promote people being healthy. And unfortunately, I just had to go to the doctors for the first time in basically forever because I can't really get into all the details right now because of a potential lawsuit. But I had a neighbor's pit bull take off my pinky finger and, had to get sewn back on, and basically through the grace of God and the universe, it looks like we're keeping it. But part of that's mindset. So if you go into that thinking, we're going to beat this infection, we're going to keep this finger, then that's probably at least 90% of the battle right there. But if you go into it, woe is me, and have a bad attitude. Another thing is, if you listen to doctors, you are done, like absolutely done. Like you're going into that place, and it's like just walking into an entire den of vipers. First off, I walk into the first hospital, and the lady's like, "Oh, do you have your insurance card?" I'm like, "No, I just got bit by my finger bit off by a pit bull." I'm walking in there without a shirt. My shirt's being used as a tourniquet, covered in blood. And then I'm like, "No, I just want to walk. I don't have my insurance card. Got attacked by a dog." She's like, "Oh, not my problem," and rolls her eyes. I'm like, "No, bet if I effing had COVID over here that you would have taken me in without insurance." And then
Yeah, get
so
some COVID money.
yeah, so it's just crazy. It must, like, yeah, like the
Yeah.
one time I need it, and I'm getting, no, like, "Oh, can we get you water? You just went through something traumatic," and then you're gonna roll your eyes at me. But anyways, yeah, that's enough of a deviation because
Yeah.
usually we're talking about economic stuff and the all the different scamdemic stuff. But if you guys haven't seen me in doing videos in 6 weeks, it's because I've had both, yeah, a lot of stuff going on, and was 100% disabled on both hands up until
You're now
pretty recently.
the
I'm
pinky
I'm still
man.
going through
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, without, I mean, you know what? Very lucky that it's the
Yeah.
two least basically valuable appendages that someone could have on them. And glad that my dogs are safe, and it wasn't some small child or some
Yeah, no kidding.
old lady or something. So I am very grateful to be in this spot talking to you today. And yeah, let's get into all the
Yeah.
current scams that are going on. And
Current scams. Yeah, like the healthcare system.
well, I mean, I haven't done a single video since
Yeah.
all this stuff kicking off in
Oh,
Israel.
for sure.
And I was still really going through it. And all I had to hear was I saw like paragliders coming into a rave in Israel. I'm like, fucking paragliders? I'm like, all I needed to know. All I need, I don't need to know another fucking thing. Like paraglider, like the top intelligence agency in the world with like one of the most fortified borders in the
They're
world.
coming in low right at the
over by
PTZ
paragliders?
cameras. Yeah.
Like they know if a fucking ant's going across that border. There's any,
No.
and they didn't respond for 7 hours. If anything, they let this attack happen, and then that Israel. And this is nothing against Israeli people or citizens, because we're talking about the high level scumbag,
the government. Yeah.
The Netanyahu's of the world. And if anything, it's a false flag to allow this to happen to gain sympathy, and maybe some of it was, hey, if America's giving all its weapons to Ukraine, and we're not really giving the weapons to Ukraine, it's basically giving the money to the U.S. weapons manufacturers, who then give the old supply of weapons to Ukraine to then boost up GDP. And then, like, all this is just getting into such a scam, because like, oh, every $100 billion we borrow, where does that go? Oh, it increases GDP.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna come to. Got to boost the GDP with some war.
How many people we need to kill? But yeah, I think Israel is probably thinking, you know what, if U.S. is going to get into it potentially with China and Taiwan, if they're going to get into it with Russia, they're going to get into it with Ukraine. Israel is probably like, well, hell, we need to go get ourselves some of the U.S. money and weaponry before they expend it on all these other people. So, and then who funded Hamas to begin with? This is not a conspiracy theory. No. It was Israel. And so, and it's not, and the thing is, the same people run in Israel, run here, run all the different places. Everything's all just a big scam. And it's all a scam right now to distract, to blame, oh, the dollar is going to go down. But guess what? Now we get to blame it on the Russians, or we get to blame it on the Chinese. And this is, ever since I've known you, we've been talking about this. And I've been talking about this, since 2013, when the U.S. was funding not like it's weird, I'm over here funding it, but it's the State Department sent $5 billion to the Azov battalion neo-Nazis in 2013. And anyone with a fucking brain could see what was going on back then.
It's pretty obvious,
everyone with all their little Ukraine flags and everything. And you know what? We had a full moon yesterday. Mom, had both my hands are all fucked up. So, a little heated mood, especially seeing.
Well, I don't know if you saw what kind of fun things they were up to at the what do you call it? Oh my goodness, now I'm forgetting it, but it's in Canada, the Parliament here in Canada. They had a little Nazi salute.
Oh, it was like a Ukraine war veteran, except
it was an SS Panzer Battalion.
Yeah, and then like, never mind, it was mainly the Russians who basically defeated Hitler, and government makes it seem like Americanizes it, like, oh, it was America came in here.
Someone didn't connect the two, that he fought against the Russians. It's like, oh wait, which side was that? It wasn't the Western, it wasn't the Allies. So I was like, some idiots.
And you guys are, have you registered over there? Don't all the podcast hosts have to get like registered over there now?
I'm not registering. I'm Norwegian. I'm not gonna register for a stupid Canadian podcasting license. Well, don't worry. It's over. I think it was over 100,000. If you make over 100 million. Oh yeah, it was. Or if you make over 100 million, that's how it starts. And then they drag you into the mud. Like Joe Rogan will actually register in Canada to get his content shown. Like it's pretty. It's more of like a control over the internet. It's just like a kind of false flag, and everybody's crying, oh, we don't see any Canadian news on social media. It's like, that's great. Like all these propagandist organizations like CBC, CTV, and Global News, all these guys are got bailed out. I remember me and Josh covered it back in, I think it was 2017 we covered when they got 600 million bailout from the Trudeau government. So, they'd just been propagandists ever since they got bailed out because when you get money from the government, You know, they got you. They're gonna stab you. You know, like it's they give you some money, but then they stab you 100 times. You know, and to get that money back that they just enticed you or they won't stab you, but they'll like get to follow exactly what they have to say and do, of course. And that's been pretty apparent, like especially during COVID. It was just beyond ridiculous, like the propaganda. I even remember texting into a local radio station here, and the guys, not the actual talk host, but the guys that sits there and control the information coming in and out, they were like attacking me and calling me a crazy person. It's like, oh, is this how media works? And I remember having the text, and it's pretty hilarious because I just posted, like VAERS. It's like, oh no, VAERS, that is just conspiracy theories. Like, oh
So
wait,
that's the vaccine
yeah, yeah,
adverse event
reaction,
reaction.
yeah,
Okay, so that in case people are wondering,
yeah,
and even that, I mean, only encapsulates such a very small
yeah.
percentage. So you got to take those numbers, and I think what they say, like almost multiply by 100, because they're only
Oh yeah, because of very little
encapsulate
reporting.
such a small percentage of
Yeah.
what's actually going on.
But anyways, we got off track there. We were talking about what's going on in the Middle East there. You know what is interesting? I kind of pointed out this, Tim, and in the Middle East, there's a lot of countries that are on the words or in a hyperinflation. You got Lebanon is a full-fledged hyperinflation. Syria is in a full-fledged hyperinflation. And then of course you got Iran has collapsed, like their currency has collapsed. And so when you have a hyperinflation, it's like what usually happens when you have nothing to lose. Like it's time for a good old war. And then, of course, you got Egypt and Turkey and high
currency wars, lead
inflation.
the hot wars.
Yeah, and Erdogan today, he just came out and he's on the Hamas side. You got to choose sides. You can't be on the people's side, on the in between those poor people getting murdered and raped and killed in all these situations. No, you can't be on their side. You got to be on the Israeli government or on the Hamas side. You can't be right in the middle saying like screw government. Like let's help these people. So it's pretty sad what's going on there, but it is a powder keg. And, when the Silk Road collapses, that's when communication between the East and West kind of dissipates. And over time, like historical times when there's chaos down there, you always have like collapses in trade and so on, and wars break out. Now, of course, we're so global and we got technology, so now that's not going to happen. But the problem is we're choosing sides now. I recently saw an article from like Canada is at war with China and Russia, and so like everybody has to choose their sides. You got to be on the Axis and or allies. You got to be on each team, and then little Jamie Dimon and other little banksters. They're funding the wars over there, funding the wars over here. It's a perfect business model. Chaos, especially when the monetary system fails. The banksters lose their jobs, but they gotta get it back by creating a war and then funding the war on both sides. So it's yeah.
And speaking of the Silk Road, I mean, China has their Belt and Road
Yeah.
Initiative, and what was it just like last week? I've got an article pulled up right now that was originally out of the Epoch Times, but now through Zero Hedge, where it shows there's a gathering of 140 countries, which is 70% of the world's nations, in Beijing to commemorate the 10th anniversary of China's Belt and Road Initiative. So just one more thing, I know people talk about BRICS a lot and, the WEFers and, maybe Bilderberg, but, they don't really talk as much about the Belt and Road Initiative that's going on. And
No, because
in
it's
China, but
funded by the AIIB, and actually there's 90
what's that? What's that?
93
The
members.
AAIB?
Asia Investment and Infrastructure Bank it's called, and like they got members here, like Argentina, Australia, Norway, Canada, Egypt, Croatia. Of course, the United States is one of the only members that's only that's not a member. Of course, Russia is a member. Like so Canada is at war with Russia and China, but they're part of, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank group project. So yeah, it's
And
pretty
also, I
hilarious.
mean,
But the
China right
AI,
now,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
China's at their apex civilization right now in terms of their power and their might. I know a lot of people in America might not realize that, but because of their demographics, because of their one-child policy, they've got essentially like a inverted pyramid system right now where they have so many old people relative to young people, and so you can't have a tiny bit of young people taking care of a shitload of old people, and America has that problem as well. And so, I've heard, some of the people I talk with think, India is more of a threat actually in the future to sort of take over things in the world. But, China they are going to have more bargaining power and a bigger seat at the table, potentially the head seat at the table, if they get ahead of this, U.S. collapse and start doing it now.
The
versus 10
problem
years
though,
from now.
yeah, the problem in China is that they have their real estate crisis. Me and Josh talked about the ghost cities like back in 2018. And I was pointing out, all these goat cities, they're building just cities and there's nobody living there. And of course, that's come back to haunt them now. You have Country Garden, you have, what was the other one there that collapsed, like two major ones, like
Evergrande?
Evergrande, of course. And so you got these two developers, they're collapsing. And meanwhile, there's the debt that is on a lot of this stuff. There was a report that I read in 2018, and it was actually from the G30 group, and it said that the actual debt to GDP in China was around 400%, and that was 2018.
And that G30 group, that's the top basically 30 central bankers in the world that come together to meet.
Yeah, exactly. It's not G30. Don't mistake it for
other people, like some people might confuse it with the other G30. So you're talking about the group of 30.
Group 30, they call themselves, and of course, like that's central bankers, chairs of banks, and economists that are meeting.
I still need to read those books. It was like, I don't know, like $180 book or something I bought with the guy who wrote the book on the G30. What was it?
It was there's a couple of them. There's his name is Stuart P. McIntosh. He's here's one of them. Like you got, it's called The Redesign of the Global Financial Architecture, The Return of State Authority. Actually, he rebranded this book, Tim, and it's not called The Return of State Authority anymore. It's something else, which is pretty like just trying to hide, his true intentions.
What's that like? That's like $150 book or something like that?
Yeah, I think like 170, 180. And then he has another one, Climate Crisis Economics, that he just came out with. That I think like 180.
I got that one too.
Yeah. But it's like
I think that one's a little bit cheaper. Maybe I cheaped out and just got the paperback on that one. But
again, they're not wanting to sell it to the regular Joe on the street because like the bullshit in here is just basically like bragging about technocrats, that taking over the world. They're talking about the Financial Stability Board, the 20 central bankers that make all the rules for financial regulation around the world and all this stuff. So again, they got a lot of control, these guys, everywhere. And of course, now they're panicking. I seen from the Financial Stability Board, I don't know if you paid attention as of late, but every central bank, I went and did a report on what central banks held in their balance sheets. And what I found is like every web page of every central bank has a financial stability report now. And that's from the Financial Stability Board. So they do a report to the Financial Stability Board about their stability. The system. And of course,
speaking of financial stability, I mean, what really underpins the entire system would be the 10-year treasury. And I'm actually, I'll admit it, I did not think it could get to 5% or 4.8, wherever it's at right this second as we're looking on the screen. I didn't think we really had the ability to do that. And
no, neither did I.
And one of the things that's pretty crazy is, my first podcast I ever came out with in 2016 was I talked about interest rate risk, and I talked about my question that made it to Janet Yellen in, I think it was like June 22nd, 2016. I asked Congressman Schweiker, who then asked somebody else. Basically, he posted on Facebook like, hey, I'm going to be in a House Financial Services Committee with Janet Yellen. Anyone have a question? And then I remember watching the Peter Schiff podcast or listening to it, and I almost fell out of my bed. I'm like, oh my God, they asked my question. Like, are you kidding me? And basically it was, at the time, just for the backstory is, the Federal Reserve, was making hundreds of billions of dollars a year. They get to keep 6% of all the interest of all the debt, and then they give back 94% to the Treasury. And I was basically like, well, what's going to happen when you're forced to raise rates, not because you want to, but because you have to? And now when you raise rates, you're underlying your bond portfolio because you're sitting on trillions of dollars of bonds. You're going to have massive unrealized losses. And instead of making money, you're actually going to be losing money. Are you going to send the Treasury a bill? And Janet Yellen said, laughed a little bit and then said it was impossible to happen. And then actually clarified, oh, wait, there is one scenario where this could happen. And that one scenario is maybe the economy is doing great and prices are going up and things are really heating up. And we're forced to raise rates to slow things down. And wouldn't that be a great problem? Well, it's a great problem now, bitch, because look what's happening with you, the Treasury Secretary, when like SVB Bank went down, First Republic went down. It's because of the unrealized losses that I was talking about on video. My first video I was ever in. I looked on this one program where I can type in a keyword, and I mumble a lot, so it's not really perfect on this thing. And it was like 100, and all my videos aren't even up there. And it was like 197 different videos over the last 8 years that I brought it up. And it's just like, how is every other person not bringing this up? And how is every other person not realizing that when you raise rates, you decrease the underlying value of that bond? And then I also then predicted on video, which sounds crazy. I did a client video January of 22 last year. And I said, I bet now they're raising rates, I bet that they're going to have some sort of scheme where these banks get to turn in their bonds that have lost a whole bunch of money, and they get to turn it in and then get 100 cents on the dollar. Now, that is what they call the bank term funding program, which most people don't even know about. Can you pull up just go to
actually, no, you don't have to. I'm tracking it on my personal website here.
Oh, actually, well,
yeah, here we go.
On with this. So with the BTFP, basically, essentially, what's going on? You're on your Signal chat right now, is what we're.
Oh, sorry.
Screen. I don't know if you want to see that.
Yeah.
But essentially, what's going on with the BTFP is so they're doing a 1-year loan. And so let's say you had $1 million bond that's now worth $500,000. The banks get to turn in that $500,000 current value $1 million par bond. They get the $1 million. And so the real banks haven't really had to actually realize these losses because they've been made whole. But, if we also were to go pull up, it just sucks with both my hands. It's like my typing is like a freaking caveman right now with like 3 fingers. But the other thing is, if you start looking at like the U.S. money supply, Fred,
no, it's decreasing. It's in deflation right now.
Or you do Fred, or type in Fred. So that's a Federal Reserve economic database. In case people are like, why do you keep saying Fred? So Fred, total bank deposits. So if you have bank deposits going down, all their lending is based off of bank deposits. And so you cannot, and the only way all these like wheels keep spinning in the system is if we're getting deeper and deeper into debt. But the banks aren't able to take on more debt in their balance sheet because they have unrealized losses. And so they're in like this contraction mode, but they haven't had to have the full ramification. Yeah, there we go. That's exactly what I wanted you to pull up. And yeah, so you sort of, where the entire history of that chart is up and to the right, maybe there's a few tiny little deviations, but that is a gigantic deviation. And that's what, guess what? That's why they're bringing us to fucking war right now, is because they need an excuse to print money. They need an excuse to lower interest rates, because in the next basically 3 years, you're probably going to have close to $1 trillion of commercial real estate. That's going, and I didn't even know this until recently, but recently as in like 2 years ago, but it was something huge. I think if you type in like Wall Street Journal, CRE, refinance or something, you'll see it's something like $800 billion or $1 trillion over the next couple of years are all going to be refinanced, because a lot of these are owned by the regional banks, but the big banks probably want the regional banks to go down. So that way, then they'll probably lower rates. They'll probably then scoop all these banks, all these smaller banks up. And then they're going to, have some sort of sweetheart deals where they don't get the losses, just like what happened with like Merrill Lynch in 2008 when Bank of America, did that emergency buyout of them. But it's all a big scam. And so they need to have an excuse to raise rates. And I'm not sure if you saw this, John, but Janet Yellen, not very many people have covered this. I think maybe just to give him credit, I think Mark Moss covered this, and this might be it. But aside from him, so Janet Yellen was suggesting much lower for much longer. Now, she didn't say that, but what she said is that the government's borrowing costs, I think somewhere over here, it's going to be, now we didn't prepare at all for this. Basically, you're like, hey, let's do a video tomorrow. I'm like, hey, can we do it today? And then, I was working out and then coming right into this. So this is all real. This is raw. This is live. We're not, we didn't plan out any of this, but I believe she said something like it was going to be 1% of the interest costs going to be like 1% of the GDP. But
I saw that as well.
Here. When Janet Yellen tells us debt cost to GDP ratio will be 1% over the next 10 years, she is really saying interest rates will be below 1%. I believe it was like 0.82 or 0.85. Yeah. So it would have to be a weighted average of 0.85% to bring that down. And so now the only ways that can happen is either they bring it down to 0.85, or, let's not try to laugh here, or the government needs to run massive surpluses to then bring it down. We know that's not going to happen, or get like their fiscal house in order.
Yeah, because they're at 1.8 trillion right now in deficit so far this year.
There's no fucking way it's going to. So what do they need to do? But then when they do that, then they fix, in quotes, one problem. Very hard for me to make the air quote air sign when I can't. Like, okay, I can kind of bend these two, but you can't fix this, because then because just like when they raise rates, they didn't even fix inflation, but then then you have massive unrealized losses. And I remember telling people, I remember even when I was working, my first company I was working for that was managing like $80 billion at the time. And I had the opportunity to talk to the top fund managers there. And I was asking them this as like a 24-year-old at the time. And, they would realize, okay, yeah, I can see the point. But, the point for them is to go along, to get along, that if it happens to them, it's going to happen to everybody else. And so everybody, and so if it's one thing that I can say, at least for my clients, that we were able to avoid, it was the long-term bond situation, because a lot of people in 10-year bonds lost, 50% over the past couple of years, or they didn't, or the current present value's off by 50 and they'll get it back in like 7 years. But by then, how many horses will have left the barn? Or then do we have hyperinflation? Or then do we have, in 7 years, we got all the 2030 coming up. So this is all an excuse to print money, to bring in the CBDC, to then say, oh, the system didn't go down because it was always going to go down. The system was going down because of the damn Russians or the Chinese or the Easter Bunny or whomever it is, or the Hamas or Iran. And so, you know what, and then we'll throw in another scam-demic while we're at it too, to keep you in the home, to then give you the universal basic income that's going to come from a CBDC. And then, you know what, another reason you haven't seen me on video the past 2 years, and kind of one of the main reasons John and I stopped doing videos is, and I stopped doing videos basically completely for a year, was I needed to make sure that I was in a position to protect myself and my family and not be vulnerable to when, everything blows up. Because guess who's not going to be getting on the CBDC? Guess who's not going to have a very good social credit score? Guess who's not going into the fucking grocery store with a mask again? Because I say again, I mean, I didn't the first time. But this time, that's why I've got a massive greenhouse. That's why I've got 36 chickens. That's why I've got all this different stuff going on. So that way I'm not going to have to be a slave. If you can't starve us out, you can't make us run. Going back to the,
you got to go back to parallel societies that they had during the communist, Soviet Union.
Hank Williams Jr., not Charlie Daniels. But then actually the Hank Williams Jr. song about, you can't starve us out, can't make us run. Do you know how that song actually starts off?
No.
It's the interest is up and the stock market's down. And so it's actually, the interest rates too. So like, Hank Williams Jr. knew. He knew. What was going on?
He's been on he understood this, and I think I showed it, but let's just quickly go through it and see the insanity of this. Watch this. Like, this is the losses of regional.
Can you zoom in on that at all?
I can't, unfortunately, but like you have. So just at the treasuries here, you got banks like Citizen State Bank has 97% loss on government security holdings. You got Union County Savings Bank, 93.2%.
When Janet Yellen's trying to say these banks are doing risky things, oh, really?
Yeah,
getting into
the biggest loss
U.S. government treasury is risky? Well, you're damn right it's fucking risky. And that's why I told you that in 2016, you dumb fucking bitch. 2016, as a 31-year-old, I was able to tell my congressman exactly what was going to fucking happen to you. Exactly. And then you said it was impossible. Well, is it impossible now? How the fuck did I know this was going to happen? And then why did I make my first ever podcast on it? Then why, when I was on James Corbett, all my favorite podcasters brought it up. First time I was at Tinfoil Hat, brought it up. First time on Dan Dick's show, brought it up. First time on Cash Daddies, brought it up. First time on Ernest Hancock's show, brought it up. First time on your show, brought it up. First time on Josh's show, brought it up. This is not some fucking accident. And this is exactly what we knew was going to happen the entire time. Exactly. And then who caused it? You guys are the ones who raised it. And it's it's a mathematical fact. It's called interest rate risk. For every 1% the rates go up, the underlying value of that bond, and technically it's a duration, not the maturity, which is for 99% of your viewers, and all viewers out there are not going to know really the difference on
that. But this is important, though. This is very, very important what you're going into here, because that is the backbone.
This was always going to happen. And I was telling you guys that this was going to happen. And then my first time getting interviewed, actually, we'll add another show to the list, Free Talk Live. And, another guy who could probably use some prayers would be Ian Freeman, who's now, I think, in jail for 8 years over a bunch of bullshit. But, basically as a political prisoner for being the first guy on the radio talking about Bitcoin, the first guy talking about Bitcoin, Ian and Mark Edge. And so, and I'm only getting heated because I know, like, some people respond to this, but my everyday daily life, I'm not like this. But it's just like, how was I, 31 years old, or maybe I was 30 at the time, or even 29. But, I already had a kid, was doing Ironman triathlons, was running a business, doing all this other shit. And you guys have hundreds of PhDs, hundreds of economists, hundreds, trillions of dollars, billions of dollars at your disposal, and budgets and AI and modeling. and I'm able to fucking figure this out in my spare time, but you guys can't figure it out. And then I bring you the exact situation. Oh, but getting back to the Free Talk Live. So Ian asked, well, I said, yeah, I'm I've just been on my show. I document the ongoing financial collapse. And he goes, what do you mean by that? And he goes, and when's it going to kick off? And I go, well, the real kickoff is going to be when the Fed is forced to raise rates, because eventually inflation is going to get out of control. And when they raise rates, it's going to wipe out the collateral of the entire system. And then they'll probably go to war with Russia. How the fuck did I know that we're going to war with Russia, that they raised the rates by 500 basis points, and now SVB is collapsing, and First Republic is collapsing. And guess what?
All the banks that you're seeing on that list.
That bank term funding program, but all these banks are underwater, and that's why.
It's in the bank term funding program.
In a cowboy and a pirate hat with two broken fucking fingers, able to figure this out, but yet Janet Yellen, who said we're never going to have another recession in our lifetime.
I remember
that she gets to be in charge of the nation's fucking treasury supply, when she's in the whole justification of having a Federal Reserve is so that way the Federal Reserve and Treasury are independent, and yet the former Fed governor, not former Fed governor, the former head of the Fed is now running the fucking Treasury. And then before her, two people before her was who? Timothy Geithner, who used to be at the head of the New York Fed, who then ran the Treasury. So the entire bullshit justification of having a Federal Reserve is to separate the two, but yet the fox is then going over to the hen house to guard it. And yet, who owns the Federal Reserve? The 12 other Federal Reserve banks. And who owns that? Who owns that?
Oh, all the banksters.
Banks. And then all day they're like, oh, let us talk about who's going to be the fucking president. Guess what? It doesn't matter who's the president, because they want us arguing down here. Oh, the president. President fucking matter, and who's above the president?
It's the monetary system, you morons.
Banks, and you've got all the think tanks and the Black Rocks and the like the Bilderbergs and the Club of Rome and WEFers and all these other people, and then you go to like 13 families. They want us fighting at the lowest level possible. And then you know what? Even if you were going to vote, first off, your vote doesn't matter because the whole thing's rigged anyways. And then even if your vote did count, you'd be much more actually effective. Now, I'm not like encouraging people to vote, but you'd be much more effective advocating in like the primary, where there's a very small percentage of people voting that then determines who's even going to be on the ballot. Because unfortunately, who's on the ballot are the same people that run and own the system. And okay, I'll take a break from my ranting.
But again, like you were talking about Timothy Geithner, a little scumbag. Okay, you're gonna like this tweet. I don't know if you've seen this at all. Have you? Like my little intervention.
I can't remember what it is, but
anyways, let's see this intervention. It's hilarious. Anyways.
Thank you. We have a question from John Sinison.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
What concerns do you have regarding the de-dollarization? And can the Fed handle a potential U.S. Treasury exodus?
Jeremy, do you want to do that? I would say it's.
No. I mean, just other than, as Tim said, I think at the outset, the fact that the Treasury market is sort of the central fundamental market in the financial world, obviously related to.
I wonder how many of them are dual Israeli citizens up there. Like every fucking one of them.
To sort of the general thrust of what we're about. But beyond that, I don't know that I'd say much else.
I would like to add to that. I agree with Jeremy that the safer and sounder the U.S. Treasury market is, the more it supports the use of the dollar in international finance, and that's good for the United States and it's good for global investors. And because of that demand, it lowers the.
You could just see like, this is what my masters told me to say. I'm scared. I don't want to say anything else.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's hilarious. Like,
and for people that don't know, the New York Fed runs. The New York Fed basically runs the Fed. For people that don't know, and Timothy Geithner was the head of the New York Fed. Then went on to be Treasury Secretary immediately after the 2008 crash. Because I think at the time he took over for Hank Paulson, who was then the former fucking CEO of Goldman Sachs. So, like, we need to be independent, and then we're going to have the CEO of Goldman Sachs. Then the CEO before that was John Corzine, who then went over to MF Global and stole a bunch of money, and then didn't get in any trouble. And then his underling was Gary Gensler, who now runs the SEC, and luckily just got his ass kicked on basically 5 different lawsuits in a row losing some left and right. But the whole thing is just so corrupt and so crazy.
But again, like it comes back to what you talked about, like they get really scared. You could see he was answering like that Duffy guy who was just like perked up as like, this is the United States, US Treasury is the strongest in the world. Like they're scared about that. Like they do. Can you imagine like them actually like having to face reality? Like because that question was asked, of course, before the interest rates started to go up. Right? Like so it's you can imagine what the question would be like. Oh, they'd be like, I don't want to say it. They're gonna lose trust in our system of scam. Like it's these guys.
That's
like
why they want to kill everybody off. That's why they want to have, maybe have a 90% world reduction to be able to control us. And we've got quotes from who is like Zbigniew Brzezinski, who said it used to be easier to kill a million people than to control a million people than to kill a million people. Now it's infinitely easier to kill a million. To kill a million people than to control a million people. And then his daughter was Mika Brzezinski on
which is CNN, right? Or MSNBC.
MSNBC. So she, and then now it's she's the wife of Joe Scarborough. So a lot of people don't know that, and maybe some people don't. But he was right up there with Kissinger and one of the top level globalists. Rockefeller, top level globalist gopher up there was Zbigniew Brzezinski. But
I don't like. I think did you post this or was it? Like I just got to share an article.
I've only been posting on Telegram, so unless it's on Telegram, but
this one here, like, did you like JP Morgan dumps?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did post that.
Yeah, then here's another one. Jamie's out there, he's trying to save his own skin or whatever he's trying to do, like, I'm gonna come after those guys, the central banksters that I'm shareholders in the Federal Reserve here.
Well, what about going back to de-dollarization? What about this article from just a couple of days ago where Chinese digital yuan CBDC used for first time to settle cross-border oil deals? So you have, there it is, Chinese digital yuan.
No, they're working on it. There's lots of projects, Tim.
They're doing it. They're not working on it. They're doing it.
If you go to the biz, and go to their innovation hub, like you actually find like 20 or 30 different projects that are ongoing,
You're talking
setting
about
up
BIZ, the Bank of International
Bank of
Settlements,
International
BIS.
Settlements, And so you have all these projects, all these cross, border settlements, they got the wholesale and then they got the retail, central bank digital currency. The wholesale is the one that's, from central bank to central bank and in the banking system. And then the retail is the one that we're going to use. That's going to be credit rated or carbon credit rated or whatever they want to, put on that, of course. So like these guys, they're never going to stop. And of course, in the book, The Curse of Cash by Kenneth Rogoff that I read in 2016, he clearly made it apparent that what the plan is with cashless. It's taxation. Yeah, that's how I learned about the G30 group, because he wrote about it in The Curse of Cash.
And you're like to your credit, you're like the only real person I know who talks about the G30. Almost
and the Group 30. Actually, back to that, Tim. This is the funniest thing. Is that actually that guy, that meeting?
Now my girlfriend's I think mad at me for yelling, and so she just put a sign on the door to tell me to act more zen as flipping out about Janet Yellen. I'm just talking about my kids and your kids and everyone's kids being slaves, and so sorry I got a little heated knowing that this
it's the future.
System that's
but that's back to like talking about Group 30. That interview that I just showed you was the Group 30, and actually during that interview there was Bloomberg, the New York Times reporters that was asking questions. So totally ridiculous, and they're just like patting them on the back, like, hey, good boys over there, like you're doing a great job here. Like then I come in with a shock, but I'm surprised that she even asked that question. She was the moderator, that lady that asked that question. But I was pretty impressed that I actually got to ask, because I put in the question first, and so like they didn't ask it. So I was like, hey, my question is not getting asked. I was like, oh, can you please add the question again? She said, and then I added it again, and then of course they managed to ask it right after a Bloomberg reporter asked like a totally like ridiculous, a super technical question that had nothing to do with reality, basically, right? But yeah, they don't like, being questioned on the authority of, their monetary system, because their monetary system is a Ponzi scheme. It's right. Like when they have deflation, Tim, and that's what we're having now because they raise rates, that deflation is the end game. Like it was in Ben Bernanke's 2002 speech. Right about it in his 2002 speech to the Federal Reserve. It's like, yeah, don't worry, guys. If we ever hit deflation, we got to we got to feel good because we do have the ultimate weapon of the money printing mechanism at the Federal Reserve to save the economy. So basically that, but again, like we've been in depression since 2008. Yeah.
Yeah, a few points I want to make on that. And actually now with what you just said, it actually makes me want to now make a different point. Or in addition to that. So, I mean, when you say we've been in depression since 2008, what people need to understand is that like, wait, no, we're not, because the GDP has been going up. Okay, well, how did they get the GDP number? Well, they take whatever the real GDP is, and they minus the inflation. So let's say the GDP grew by 5, and then they say inflation's 3. Well, 5 minus 3 is 2, so the GDP grows by 2. And basically for 15 years, that was pretty much what was going on. But let's say the real inflation rate was 10. Now we're talking not now, we're talking like 5 years ago. So let's say the real inflation rate was 10. Well, 5% GDP growth minus 10 is negative 5% contraction. So they have a bullshit inflation number that then goes right into the bullshit GDP number, which is then bullshit because, okay, GDP, like, what does that measure the health of the country?
And then the inflation number is bullshit.
Are we better off sending $100 billion to Ukraine? Are we better off that everything costs more money? Are we better off that when we go fill up our gas tank? Are we better off that, the $100 at the grocery store gets you like one bag, especially if you're, eating organic and non-GMO and not all their, poison food that they want to push down our throats? Not to mention, here's another article I'm going to put on screen. Can you make it speaker view so when you do the thing, people can see this? So we've got, it might already be, I just don't know. So we've got meat giant Tyson Foods reveals new insect plant in 2025. But to go back to the other point that I was initially going to make is that the reason they can't have like a permanent deflation or even like a very small amount of deflation.
If we could share it again, Tim. I didn't have it.
Okay. Now the reason they, I'm not sure which. See, I go back. So yeah, here's meat giant Tyson Food reveals new insect plant in 2025. So a new one. So what? Do they have existing ones out there?
Eats the bugs, Tim.
But this is one of the most important points that people could realize why it's going to end in hyperinflation. So I mean, there's basically two options: either inflation or deflation. Probably not going to be, I guess the third option would be just like ho-hums, and there's neither. That's probably not how it's going to happen. But so let's say there is deflation. Well, they can't have deflation. It's hard to do is having basically no hands. But there used to be that Mike Maloney, the Mike Maloney Hidden Secrets of Money Part 4, where it shows since the money is backed by debt, or the currency rather. So let's say you're the only two people on an island. You borrow the first $100 that's ever been existed from me, 1-year loan, 3% interest. After 1 year, you have to pay me $103. But guess what? You can't, because there's only $100. So you have to borrow more money. So essentially, from day one, it's a scheme that can never end up paying itself off. So if you have this much currency and you have this much debt, and you've got this much money, and I'm like messing this up over here. If you use your money to pay off the debt, well, then all you're going to be left with is debt, because the debt is the currency. And so all your dollar bill is an IOU for a treasury that's also an IOU. So your dollar bill is an IOU of an IOU. And so guess what? As that system of deflation is happening, it could cause the entire system to blow up, which then would lead to a hyperinflation because nobody would use the currency. So then to get ahead of it, as you just pointed out, they have to go print a bunch of money with their money printer. And I wish I had my 2 money printer guns over there going. But I guess they're going to use one really right now. But if they start printing all the money, then that's also going to eventually lead to the hyperinflation. And so they want a war, and they also want the CBDCs. So they need to have a problem reaction solution. So either way, these guys are trying to get inflation the entire time. And it's like, careful what you wish for, because you know what? You wanted the inflation. Well, is it that grave a problem? Janet Yellen in 2016 telling I don't even know, like a young 30-year-old Tim Picciott at the time, that it was impossible. Well, that's funny because, why don't you guys hire me? I'm not for sale, but would you want to hire me to be Treasury Secretary or the Fed so I can just close it down? I mean, if anything, they should just be going off like the 10-year Treasury, let it flow, or 2-year Treasury, let it flow. And then that's the Fed funds rate, or there shouldn't even be a Fed funds rate, but make that the Treasury rate. If you're going to have a current screw job system, at least not have that system getting owned. But, because right now we are basically high-tech slaves, and it's getting out of control. And how we started this off was talking about, the Treasury. We've mentioned that, several times. And, right now, the 10-year Treasury did breach 5% for the first time since 2007. And there's been terrible auctions going on right now. Where
And what is the mortgage rate at? Like 8%, right? The 30-year?
Yeah, it's right around 8. And, and I thought I was getting screwed, at 6.25 because, right as I was trying to put offers in on houses a little over a year ago, it's like right when things started going up and, got screwed out of a couple of houses, even though I offered more than full price on some of them. And, there was backroom deal. Anyways, I'm glad things didn't work out with some of those other places. And I'm glad where I'm at now. But yeah, I mean, and this is really stretching the consumer, which is why you've got the CEO of Bank of America, Brian Moynihan, saying that the consumers are at a point of pain. Because you and I have talked about how this was going to be a cost of living crisis.
Yep.
And we have been talking about this ever since, basically we started doing videos together in 2018. And this is exactly what we're going through. And so because it's a currency war that's getting out of control, they need to jump in front of it, and they can't just let it collapse. They need to control the collapse. And the best way to control that collapse is going to be through a war. And then they're going to, it's not like the US fighting them. I mean, it's all basically all a bunch of theater with the same controlling families up at the top, who are all sitting offshore, who are all want to basically kill most of the population anyways. So that way they can control the resources. And I mean, we did a video, like 2 years ago, on how the Rockefellers and the Intercontinental Exchange, which is, the New York Stock Exchange owners, wanted to basically have an ETF and commoditize the entire basically.
Yeah, just commoditize everything. Like it's a natural asset corporation. Like they wanted to create a
people that have
special.
done videos on that are like me, you, Corbett, and Whitney Webb. And I say that's pretty fucking good company to be in right there with those with all those heavy hitters. But I've never seen another person bring that up besides all those individuals. So
And here, like this is my website. I worked on a project actually for Mike Smith, that he does podcast with Doug Casey, right? And so Mike paid me to, like put this together. And so I created it, and it's called younggloballeaders.club, not .com, no, .org, I think is their website. I actually took the domain .club because that's more pertinent.
I think .club, yeah, that's a pretty good one.
And so I put it together so you can go here and search on, the actual Great Reset. You could listen to these because these are minions, that are getting taught what to do. Like it's a 5-year program.
I love how you have like an anonymous website and then you have a video with you in it at the bottom.
Yeah, I couldn't care less, like about these. But there's also another community. Now they got global shapers. So like young global leaders, there's like between 30 to 40-year-old leaders, and it's like 3,700 of them. And now they got another 10,000 plus, global shapers, which is like from 20 up to I think it's from 16 up to the 20 or whatever. No, 30. And so they add this, and of course, like this is just to take the kids and then brainwash them, at an early stage into these globalist, thing. Like the thing is like everybody's talking about the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum is that, right? Like it's the program for the corporate elites to, be a part of the United Nations Agenda 2030 program. And of course, on top of that, like, and sitting around like in, the United Nations, I remember when I was young, Tim, I was a part of something called Junior Chamber International. I got training there, like that, training on personal, on how to portray yourself as a public speaker, all this training to make you really good at, putting a message forward. And little did I know that later when I actually, this is how I got kind of like ostracized from the group, Tim, and you love this. I actually asked one of the leaders there. He's a top leader in the world in cybersecurity. He has his own consulting agency, like consulting for Microsoft and all these big companies, Amazon, and so on. And so I asked him, it's like, I looked into this monetary system, and it looks like it's a Ponzi scheme or whatever. And I was like, don't you ever talk about that ever again to me? This is you should never look into conspiracy theories like that. And that's when I kind of like got the reality check. But that was back in 2006 or 5.
Came from the CIA.
Yeah, and that was 2005. And so I kind of got that first thing where I started to look into the stuff. And then I found out later, Junior Chamber International is the youth organization. It's the young global leader for the UN. Basically. And so like all these people that I went there with, like a lot of them have now jobs in the United Nations, there's 125,000 employees of the United Nations, that are running around in 100 different sub-agencies, and all these guys, all they work on is, actually former Norwegian head of state, former Prime Minister Gro Brundtland, her Our Common Future book. And I actually asked, there was a friend of mine, he runs his own, he jumped out of RBC right now. He used to run their gold fund at the Royal Bank of Canada. But he got out of there. He starts his own thing. But what he was telling me at school, when he went to this high, like private school, they actually had to read Our Common Future, as a thing, because in
Maurice
there they're
Strong.
talking about taking it. Yeah, Maurice Strong was a part of writing that. And so they took that, in there to talk about, taking private property, and that we need, like everybody to be centralized in cities and all this stuff, right? And the same lady, so this is like Norway has a massive financial crisis now. Everything is collapsing in Norway, which I predicted pretty easily because of
They
massive
always
debt
put
bubble.
Norway up as like, this is like
Oh, it's the best,
place
the
to
most
retire,
solid,
the
yeah. And the
happiest
oil
place on
fund,
earth.
we got the
And it
oil
also has
fund.
the highest taxes, so
Yeah,
this is proof
like
that
we have the oil fund, right? Like the big
her
like
mom
sovereign
still lives
wealth
there,
fund.
right? They used,
Oh,
you still, yeah,
Yeah, and she's like, if it wasn't for her living with somebody else, she would be poor as heck. Like she lives off of government, retirement, because
much
in
the case-
Norway it's so
pretty much the
expensive
case
that you can't
worldwide.
save for yourself. Like she paid 51% income tax as a cleaning lady, for crying out loud. That's like vicious rape of the population. So like again, it comes back to now the oil fund has dropped like the 20% because it has like, well, we were smart. We're gonna go. I remember talking about this when they moved to get into 75%. Is it now? When I warned about it, it was 55% stocks and then 45% bonds. But I warned about it. Like it's like they're going into stocks. Actually, the oil fund owns 1% of all the stocks in the world, Tim. And so what ended up happening is like now every stock market has crashed.
That's like your
the world.
Norwegian
That's
sovereign
start
wealth fund. Is that what
collapsing.
you're talking
The
about?
bond portfolio, yeah, the sovereign wealth fund, and so the bond portfolio is collapsing, and so like this, almighty fund, that was the safest in the world, is like, oh, it's like great, we actually during COVID it took a whole bunch of money out of it. First of all, and then second, the government in Norway got into mass amounts of debt that they never had been into. And so they screwed themselves over. So actually the government and the private sector in Norway is screwed. And again, like you look to countries around the world now that are struggling. You got Germany, Sweden, you got China, of course, is collapsing. Well, what is happening? Oh, wait, global demand has collapsed. Like talking about GDP, like shut up about GDP. Like there's nobody wanting to buy anything because they can't afford anything.
Or even worse, they're like, oh, the U.S. consumer is spending more money. It's proof they're resilient. They're spending more money because they fucking have to. That's why. Because
and credit
everything
cards
costs
just
way more
peaked
money.
again. Yeah, and it's credit cards it's credit card debt. Actually, credit cards are up again. Just news data that came out the other day.
Speaking of the bond system, look at the article we have up here right now. Is there is no fixed income asset that has outperformed U.S. cash in 2023. Also want to say, none of this is investment advice. This is their own. Yeah. It's for educational and informational purposes only. Please talk with your own financial advisor. If you don't have one, you can check out the website, which I don't really like my website, and I was trying to build a new one right before I got injured. So there you go. But this is something I was talking about for years ahead of time, that we were in such a precarious spot, and I had clients get mad at me who were in cash prior to going into this, because I'm like, well, they're like, well, let's at least go in bonds, making this. I'm like, well, the problem is when the interest rates go up, the underlying values of bonds go down. And so, it actually was safer to be in cash, which is, really super crazy. But eventually in the long run, going in cash would be like the worst thing to do in the long run. Same thing with like some of the longer term bonds. But when you have, all the quote unquote safe investments, retirees, if retirees want to be really safe, and this is not retirement, I'm just giving like the typical rationale, not like what they should be doing. But typically it's like, okay, 60% stock, 40% bonds, and then now they have
that is
the stock portion of their portfolio, could be getting wrecked. The bond portfolio got wrecked.
Is wrecked, yeah.
The stock, is wrecked, and then could be is wrecked even more. And now,
and the baby boomer, the biggest portion of the economy, like demographic wise, are retiring in both Canada, United States, and in all of most Western countries.
And which is also why they don't want to pay out all these unfunded liabilities. Like they don't want to pay out Social Security, Medicare. That's even worse.
200 trillion.
And I gave a presentation at Anarchapulco 2019 called Crisis Retiring. It was a playoff of Doug Casey's Crisis Investing, because Doug Casey was supposed to be the final speaker right after me. Then he didn't show up. I'm like, oh crap! I ended up, here I am, like naming something like in his honor. And then but anyways, I talked about interest rate risk and talked about how, instead of doing bonds, there's other strategies that I would use. And so, I don't want to talk about those strategies here, but that is something that people could, especially if you're like 55 to 65, that could be, or I say within 10 years of retirement, would be a good time to talk about, because the most important time to be quote unquote like safe and conservative, because everyone thinks like, oh, you're 87 years old, that's when you be super conservative. No, it's actually the basically 3 years before and 3 years after you retire, or you could say 5 years before, 5 years after, or 10 years before. But really, it's the few years before and the few years after you have to start withdrawing funds is when it really matters, because there's something called sequence of return risk, which is, it doesn't, if you're 30 years old and you're saving money and investing and the market goes down or gold goes down or whatever you're in goes down.
Yeah, you can recover.
Well, then you get to buy more of it. So if you're putting, and then you end up going up and you can average it out. But it doesn't matter if you average even 10%, if year one, you're down 40 or 50 or 60, because if you're withdrawing funds, you not only have to make up for what you lost, but you have to make up for what you withdrew as well. And, but the thing is, most people have nowhere near enough money to retire. They have nowhere, they want everybody, what was it, Yuval Harari, they want everybody drugged out, playing video games, watching sports ball, and then they want to get them, all shot up with all these jabs, and then, oops, there's some other war. Now we don't. And then if you happen to not die from the war, well, then here's, here's your mRNA shot. And then if you happen to not even get your mRNA shot, well, guess what? Now we're able to, have mosquitoes deliver it, or we could put it into the lettuce. We're gonna put it into the pork. We're gonna have you eating bugs. I mean, a lot of stuff that these guys, really have planned. And I probably think going like 5 or 10 minutes over here, because actually speaking.
But they're Malthusians. That's all it comes down to, Tim. It's like they're after, Thomas Malthus wrote this in 1700s. That he wanted less
Darwin
population
as well. Like he was like,
I think so. Like he's a Danish guy, this Malthus guy, and of course, all bad socialist ideas seems to come out of course, out of Scandinavia. But
and they were all part of. It's all like the Fabian socialism, and
I think so. Like
a lot of this comes from, and
and then of course, like later on, like 200 years later, Club of Rome attached their think tank to those ideas. But that's all they are. When I actually asked ChatGPT about this, it's like, are the United Nations ideas Malthusian? And of course, like I just spit out like, yeah, there's a lot of Malthusian ideas in the United Nations, but they're not Malthusian.
Well, apparently, sorry, I was gonna say, apparently, if you I saw it today that if you ask Alexa what's going to go on with the 2024 election, apparently it says there's not going to be it. Alexa apparently is saying, you probably could find this either on like,
because I don't have Alexa. I couldn't try.
I don't have Alexa, but I saw this article today. Apparently, it's saying that,
well, if you have a war.
Due to the War Powers Resolution Act of 1973, the U.S. will not have an election in 2024, and that's what. So I'm sure there's some programmer that's going to be, on that one to make sure that one doesn't happen again.
Yeah, no, it's but that's exactly we were talking about, like when you have a crisis, and actually, it's not just that they do it without saying it. I listened to PhD in economics from Manitoba in 2016, and he said like, oh, you know what fixed the Great Depression? It was World War III. I was like, oh yeah, like it's fantastic. Like let's go around murder, innocent children and women. Yeah, sorry. Let's go out there, murder innocent women and men. Like let's go and murder each other. Like have let's have a nuclear holocaust. To raise GDP. For these moron elites that think that they know anything. Meanwhile, they're like the 9,000 plus economists that sits at these central banks around the world, like they have no clue what they're doing. Basically, they created a Ponzi scheme, and they're like just as scared as these Ponzi schemers. There's a lot of them in Norway, by the way, that get caught all the time and have a massive Ponzi scheme, and they go in prison. That's what happens to Ponzi schemers. And so just be prepared, to take consequences for your actions that happen through time, guys. And it's a warning, and it's not a non-aggressive warning, because it's just telling you guys that actions have consequences. When you run a system, you empowers people on purpose, and you don't care because you sit there with your $200,000-$300,000 salary, whatever they make, and you sit there in DC and have no clue what's going on in the real world because you're not out there, with the blue collar people. I know plenty of them, and they're all in trouble right now with their mortgages, with cost of living. And so, yeah, you know what? You guys are a bunch of idiots, and you have no clue what's going on. Sorry. That's to sum up the whole conversation we had, I think, Tim.
Yeah, no, it sounds like I just found some pictures of Acapulco. I know that's kind of how we started off the show, but maybe that's how we can end with it as well. And yeah, it looks pretty horrific. I mean, some of these hotels and that have just been, I mean, obviously not like we're caring about like the billionaire hotel owners, but it's just, I think, is this the Princess Mundo right here?
Oh yeah,
it almost
might.
looks like it. Looks like this might be like the tennis courts where they had the Mexican Open.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Oh, apparently Mike Pence has dropped out of the race. Anybody cares about that? But no, it was definitely great being back on with you and being able to vent. And I haven't been able to do any shows since all this attack happened because I wasn't mentally and physically with it to be able to do that. And so,
are you sure it didn't work at the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, they were like, hey, we were wondering how you were able to, figure out all this stuff, before everybody else and warn us. No, I didn't get it. No, they just picked.
No, I was saying, was the guy with the pitbull working for the?
Oh, who knows? Yeah,
it's like, get him!
Apparently, I've also just saw an article too that Erdogan is potentially thinking of maybe declaring war against Israel.
Yeah, he's supporting Hamas. Like that was just, I was talking about that early in the show. Actually, he came out and supported Hamas, and so. But it's funny, he has his own genocide going on with the Kurds. Listen to this.
Who was the initial person to support Hamas?
Israel.
Israel were the initial people to support who created it.
But so what's interesting, because Sweden is getting into NATO right now. Well, guess what? Erdogan, suddenly they're about to get in, and then suddenly chaos breaks out in, guess where? In Sweden, where the Kurdish mafia is taking off, shooting people everywhere in Sweden. Right, and then Erdogan comes in. They clamp down on the Kurds, that of course they hate because it's a communist commune, that are in territory of Turkey, and so they came in, took care of them, and then now the actual parliament of Turkey has to vote on Sweden getting into NATO. Can we get up?
I do remember. I do remember seeing that. So it's just. Yeah, it's just crazy how much stuff is going on. I feel like now it's just,
well, everybody needs to have this in their mind. When you hear about these morons mongering about war, wanting to have all this chaos happening and having a split into, like, oh, we got to go murder these people because we hate them because they're bad people. What we got to remember too is, like, everybody's, terrorists, they might be freedom fighters on the other side because they feel oppressed by someone, by a government.
The U.S. military teaches that the founding father were terrorists. I mean, remember there was a video that Alex Jones was playing back in the day where it was showing somebody secretly taped, their captain or lieutenant, whoever it was, talking about, George Washington being terrorists and how we can never. I mean, obviously yeah, you're exactly right. But the thing is, if we're gonna have all these wars over religion, and basically, there's a lot of, the central tenet of all these religions, you should be loving everybody, and so it's just like, oh, well, he doesn't agree the same way as me because there's differentiations here or there, and their book that may have been changed, or their book that is written in metaphors that could be alluding to other stuff, their book that had the Council of Nicaea, and I forgot what year it was, like 322 AD or 400 something AD, where they took stuff out, put stuff. I mean, who knows? We don't. I'm not trying to like crap in anybody's religion or beliefs, and it's actually quite the opposite. Is that if anything, people should be. And I know I wasn't exuding the best of this when I was going on my rants, and really everyday life. I'm not going on these gigantic rants because whatever's coming. I mean, you need to get mind, body, spirit right. And so I've worked a lot in my mind and the body, and now even though I went off earlier today on our little rant talking about Janet Yellen, really. There's whatever's going to happen is probably more spiritual. And I also would like to think that, maybe before they go and they press the nuke button, there might be some divine intervention or God coming in.
Who knows?
Coming in to stop. But, I do think you know, they're going to have to allow quite a bit of it to happen, and just I mean, at this point, I mean, you need to be prepared. You need to be prepared also financially. You've got to have your, you know, the basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs covered as well. You know, food, water, shelter.
Be
I
off
mean,
grid with your food and with your finances. That's basically what it comes
unless
down
you want to go start going to you know, the Tyson food, you know, bug factory. I mean, so or, you know, even if you can get food, it's all gonna be poison. And so, you know, do you want to be reliant on that? And I'm not
100%.
selling any food or anything, you know, so I'm not selling like any, you know, I don't have any promo codes.
Oh,
to
neither
go
do
buy
we,
this or
but
that,
it's
just
important.
like, but it's
Have
just like
your
important.
garden. Start with that. You know, like I have a massive garden. Like it's so important. It's like you gotta have that. I'm actually building a greenhouse, not as big as yours, but I'm building a very nice greenhouse with a
Nobody's
patio
as big as
inside.
mine.
Yeah. Well, it's really good. You should see it. You know, if
I
you ever
definitely
have
am gonna
time.
have the biggest one in
Yeah.
the neighborhood. So
No, I loved it. I was in love. You know, I'm a garden geek, so I was pretty excited when I saw it.
well, it's a little windy today, but I know because obviously I'm not building anything right now. So we had I had done a lot of the getting all the poles in late June. The game plan was to in October when it cools down a little bit, because I'm in Phoenix, so obviously it's, you know, super hot here. So
Not like here, we're just a -5 Celsius today, so
yeah,
good
so now basically everything, like it's like 13 feet tall, and we're putting, I think on Sunday my guy's coming over and we're putting the so the end walls are up right now. We just got to put the other, I think they call it like purlin or something, putting that up. And then also today we were fixing the other garden, because in Phoenix I tried getting it going in like July, but then I was traveling and it's super hot. And then I looked at my water bill and it's like, oh, you know, you used like 45,000 gallons of water. I'm like, oh, maybe I mean,
now you have a
maybe
bill
last
though,
week.
right? Like you have a well now though, right?
No, it comes
Yeah.
from a well, but it's not my well. So it's
Oh, yeah.
it ultimately, but so anyway, yeah. So it was and we did have a lot of rain last year. So in case people are like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that much water in the desert. I mean, all the wells were fully topped up. There's a crap, and there's huge aquifers here that never.
And it was good. Like,
advertised.
do you remember like how the drought in California and like in that area, you know, around you, Nevada and everything, it was supposed to be like, oh, climate change, you know, like we're in the drought, it's gonna last forever, we're gonna all die. It's like, oh wait, suddenly like nobody talks about it anymore because you got a
And there's some
massive rain and
propaganda
waterfall.
around. I mean, so the real story is most of Earth's fresh water is underground. I mean, it's a tiny fraction. I don't know the exact number, like 1 to 4%.
Not unless you're in Canada, you know, like Canada, it's freaking
But you guys
water
have all,
everywhere.
and I was in Canada this summer. I wasn't by you, but you know, and we had driven 10 hours north up to like this Chapleau region. And actually the crazy thing is I didn't see a single fucking fire, a single evidence of smoke anywhere. And I was there during all this, and I booked my ticket like I think a day or two before all the
We've
Canadian
had smoke here like all summer almost off and on.
But my dad, like 4
yeah.
hours away from me, he was saying that in Syracuse, he was saying that he was getting a ton of smoke coming from Canada. And here I am. I had drove cumulatively over 20 hours north and south in Canada.
That's how
and
big
didn't see
Canada
a
is.
single fire. I mean, a single fire, anything. And so it's like, it's kind of weird. Like you know, I was expecting to just be, you know, inundated in this, and it wasn't. But yeah, it was beautiful. It's like all of a sudden, like, I feel like everyone could have their own private lake in Canada. It's so crazy. It's like we're like
I
my girlfriend's parent.
I just flew up north to do a job at a huge reserve, like 8,000 people in the middle of nowhere. And when you fly up north, like it's ridiculous. It's like hundreds of lakes.
Or I can see like
the
camping. It's probably thousands of the camping up there. Like you could just basically pull over, you know.
You're not allowed to. Hey, don't even try that. The government will put you in prison if you try to.
Are you not allowed? Are you not allowed to? No,
you gotta
go. Not allowed to boondock.
No, you gotta be in a public spot in a public government capital. No, you could do backwards. You gotta get onto Crown land, the Queen's land, or no, the King Charles land, anyways.
I saw a map. I saw a map up in a cabin I was in. It was from like maybe 1956, and it says reproduce with permission from Her Majesty the Queen. I'm like, a bunch of fucking like.
Oh, they're still into that stuff. It's like it's laughable, but yeah.
That you guys have to go get permission from the Queen to make a map of canoe routes in Canada.
Oh yeah,
you have to ask the Queen.
It's her land.
And another thing is, the Queen was on your guys' currency when she was, it was like when she was like
Oh, yeah.
6 or maybe it was like 9 years old. It was
Oh,
something
yeah.
crazy. It was like,
Well,
she was like,
you know, like we had the same as in the United States, where they got rid of the silver and the Canadian coinage. I documented that in my book on the Canadian economy, which is hilarious. I predicted
well,
a
they got rid of that in
massive real
1964
estate
here.
collapse in my book there, and now look at where Canada is. Like Toronto and Vancouver has just completely collapsed. You know, like oh wait, what happened in 2017 when I wrote my book? They cut interest rates
Yeah,
because
after
interest was
they
going. Yeah,
was
it was hilarious.
Brown's bottom after he sold all the gold in like 2003 at like $200-300 an ounce.
Yeah,
But I do have to
Norway.
get going because
Yeah.
I've got
Okay.
cleaners coming over right now, and I do have to clean up a tiny little pre-clean before they come. But I forgot they were coming when I scheduled this. But anyways, dude, it was definitely great talking with you again and being
Yeah,
on
check
here.
out.
Thanks for.
So where can people find you?
Right now, the Liberty Advisor Show, it would be the best place people could find me. You can get the content. I'm going to start putting out more content again. You know, I was planning on doing it, and then, you know, all the dog stuff happened and get behind. I mean, I'm still dealing with it right now. I can't bend either. I can't make a fist with either hand right now. So, yeah. So anyways, yeah, you guys can find me at the Liberty Advisor Show. You can get on an email list over there, so that way you can be ahead of the news. I hardly ever send out emails, so it's not like I can get spammed, but, you know, at some point, you know, we're probably gonna get a little bit more, you know, a little more diligent on doing that. And I would say, you know, if you, I guess one ask would be, you know, if anyone is like a financial advisor in America watching this and you align with us, you know, I am looking for like a commission sales guy or woman to be able to, you know, basically take like intro phone calls and even, you know, be an advisor. Cause, you know, right now, that's probably one of the areas I sort of lack in, you know, is having that, you know, salesperson type role. And it's not like even that hard selling. It's people that come on the website and schedule with us. And so, you know, I need to be able to have someone that could take that intro call, but ideally someone that's in the business, you know, ideally if they had a Series 66, but, you know, not super hard to acquire that. You don't need a Series 7. And actually I would advise sort of against that. I used to have it and then drop that. So, but anyways, no, if anyone out there knows somebody that, you know, is more, voluntarist, anarchist, leanings and, you know, doesn't like, you know, the current job and they want to have, you know, unlimited income potential and control their own hours and work from home and, you know, just be on this journey together to help save as many people's retirements as possible. And, you know, it's just trying to be the least worse off. You know, we're not making any promises, but at the same point, you know, I think that our investment strategy is trying to provide the lifeboats. And, you know, right now the average person doesn't realize they need
You want to be the
lifeboats.
least worst off, you know, in the
I mean, and
depression.
Doug Casey will talk about that.
Yeah.
You know, I've talked about that. You talk about that. And so, you know, we're not, and, you know, and it could mean that you make millions of dollars on these investments, but those millions of dollars could be in deflated value. And so when we talk about Bitcoin maybe being $1 million, well, it doesn't mean, you know, woohoo, it's $1 million. It means, you know, there's blood in the streets and lots of bad things. So, you know, another careful what you wish for, but, you know, it'd be better to have that and have it go up a bunch, even if it's not keeping up with inflation. Hopefully it's exceeding it and other things are exceeding it, but certainly better than if you have cash that got hyperinflated away like it did in, you know, Germany, you know, when they had the gold mark and that collapsed into the Renton mark, then that collapsed for $1 trillion to 1 into the Reich mark, and then that collapsed into the Deutsche mark. And so, you know what, a lot of people doing the safe things got absolutely you know what, and they're still going to get, you know, absolutely shellacked. And, you know, if you want to be with a guy that saw it ahead of time, that was on video talking about it ahead of time, they had the balls to talk about this, to the Federal Reserve governor on the floor of Congress in 2016, you know, I'm the guy. So the Liberty Advisor Show is where you guys can find my content. And thank you for having me on. And we do have a link to your stuff there as well too. So you can go there and then click. And we got a bunch of your videos up there as well. And to get to the economic truth. And yeah, I am interested in getting, if you could send me some of the, where can I find those graphs that you were showing earlier today?
It's under my infogram. If you search actually up John Sneisen infogram, you'll actually find them there. Like they're available on, like it'll pop up on Google actually. Like, and you can click on it. And all my
one on Signal, and I'll reference it in a future video because we're not got the right hand taken up. But anyways, dude, it was nice talking with you.
Yeah, pleasure. And we'll be talking again for sure. There's a lot of fun things happening. So we'll talk to you soon.
Watch out for those pit bulls. So, yeah. Everyone stay safe. Watch out for those fucking pit bulls.
Yeah.
And you know what? And you do not want to fight a pit bull, but you know, I had to save my dog's life. And you know what? You want to be with some, also all the women out there, which I probably very few women watching us, especially this far in, but you know, you want to be with some beta male guy. Well, guess what? Some beta male guy's not going to go save your dog from a pit bull. and sacrifice his hands. So not that I wanted to, not that I was looking for it, not that I
Well, in
would
the
ever
moment,
wish
what
this
can
on
you?
anybody again, besides, maybe Klaus Schwab and some other people. But besides them, yeah, it sucks. But you know what? Could have been worse. Glad to be here, and we're gonna fight harder than ever. But thank you.
Yeah, I'll talk soon, Tim. Have a good one.
Later, man. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, bye.